Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you are listening to episode number 6. Today, I'm joined by Ryan Fuhr of Quality Deer Management Association, where we'll discuss how to begin a QDM co-op, how to get involved with your local Quality Deer Management Association branch, and Ryan shares an awesome hunting story. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. You're listening to episode number 6, and today I'm joined by Ryan Fuhr of Quality Deer Management Association. I got to say, I'm pretty excited to have Ryan on. This podcast has been in the making for quite a few weeks, a few challenges in getting the schedules to align, but overall, we're making it happen today. The reason I'm probably the most excited is, number one, Ryan has a wealth of knowledge across the spectrum of deer, no matter what it comes to, whether you want some statistics on what the deer herd is doing, whether you want statistics on mating dates and fawn weights, and you name it, this guy has the information. He's a wealth of knowledge. But specifically what we want to talk about today is how to begin a QDM co-op. This is an idea I've been toying around with at our farm the past year or so, and I wanted to get a little bit more information. I knew kind of high level what some of the steps were to take, but I wanted to get some more detail, and I assumed that there'd be some folks out there listening that would be interested in the same thing. Essentially, a QDM co-op is folks with smaller chunks of land coming together to create habitat principles that kind of span a larger piece of land than you may own just yourself. Recently, we've started having conversations with some of the neighboring farmers. One of them specifically rents out or leases out some of our fields to plant. So we started having some preliminary conversations just to kind of gauge their interest in how they approach deer hunting. Is it a brown they're down approach, or are they looking to harvest more mature deer? Are they beyond the antler restrictions that are in place in Pennsylvania? Are they looking to implement harsher restrictions on themselves to make sure that, bucks specifically are reaching a more mature age, or at least having an opportunity to develop? So we started having those conversations, and I want to just kind of consider how we could take this to the next level and what the outcomes might be, and, the time frame that it might take for something like this to take hold. But first and foremost, usually at this point I would introduce my esteemed colleague, Phil Marchek. Unfortunately, he's not able to join us today. He had a personal matter that he had to attend to and wasn't able to hop on the call in time. So he'll be back on hopefully next week. But with that said, I think the amount of information that Ryan has to share, I think we should probably just jump right into the phone call with Ryan. So I'll go ahead and dial him up and we'll get started. All right, and we're back. I'm joined by Ryan Fuhr of the Quality Deer Management Association. Ryan is the regional director for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, West Virginia, and Southeast Ohio, if I'm not mistaken. We're super stoked to have Ryan on today. But before we get started, Ryan, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Good. How was? I know you recently got back from vacation. How was your time away?
It was really nice. It was always, as vacation is, it was short, but it was good. It was good to get to the beach and see family and hang out, and kids playing in the water. So it's always fun. Did a little fishing while I was away as well.
Nice. Doesn't sound like a bad vacation in my opinion. I know coming back from vacation, it only takes about 2 days until it seems like a distant memory, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, I've read up on you just a little bit. Obviously I spend a lot of time on the QDMA website and want to just kind of get a little bit more familiar with who you are. But for those who are listening who maybe don't know who you are and what the role of a regional director of the Quality Deer Management Association is, can you just give us a little bit of background about yourself, your hunting background and professionally, and where you're from?
Sure. I am from southwestern Pennsylvania, born and raised. I've basically been in the hunting industry for a long time since I've been a young child. I started out shooting archery when I was about 8 years old. Basically just because, bow hunting was up and coming, and I had this fascination with trying to kill a white-tailed deer with a bow and arrow, and I picked the bow up when I was 8, and I really haven't put one down since. And I had this huge drive and passion to be a hunter, it's a pretty cool story, or story, if you will. But my dad and my grandparents, I really didn't come from what you would call a hunting family. They hunted some, maybe first day of deer season here and there. Family would come in and do a little bit of hunting, small game, and fished a little bit. But the passion and drive I had for it was very deep rooted, or deep seated, if you will, like almost from who knows how many generations ago. But it was pretty neat that it was what I had to do. It pulled me in, and I have never left. So I've shot a bow competitively, professionally, and it just kind of rolled right into, I owned my own archery shop for, I guess, 8 years. And then through college and everything, and got the chance to work for the QDMA, and I've been doing that for a while now too, so it's pretty good.
Nice. So I like two things there that I liked is that you're also a Pennsylvania boy, which I like here, and I'm from the central part of the state, so the Bedford County area is where I grew up. And so one question is, like, I'm assuming Steeler fan.
Absolutely. Is there any other?
That's we're probably going to get a lot of flack from those in Ohio, right, maybe listening to this. And then number two, what I liked hearing was you started shooting when you were 8. My daughter is 8. She started shooting. Oh, actually, I misspoke. She'll be 8 this weekend. Actually, we have a big birthday party.
Oh, cool.
But so she started shooting a compound when she was 7. Now I haven't put any sights or anything on it for her yet, because I just have her kind of shooting into a blank target, trying to get her to help her get her mechanics together and make sure she gets all of her anchor points and stuff like that. So that gives me some hope that she started this early, that maybe she can follow in maybe your footsteps and work in the outdoor industry, which her dad would love that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And I'll tell you what, it's better. The chances of that happening now are better than they were then. It wasn't really cool to shoot a bow when I was 8, but it's really cool now with the hunter games, and all the archery is really fastly growing. So we're finding across the nation a lot of young kids are getting into it, because it is a really cool effort.
Yeah, no, it's great. I love seeing. I just went to the range yesterday. I saw probably three kids that were all under the age of, I'd say, 13. Shooting with their dad or their uncles or whomever it was, which was great. The flip side of that is it's at some point we'll have them in the woods and be working with the additional pressure, but we'll take it just to make sure we have a little bit of a louder voice when it comes to voicing our opinions about policy and so forth, which is always a good thing.
Absolutely.
So I guess before we get into the QDMA or QDM specific stuff, I wanted to just kind of get a sense of how your 2015 deer season went. Did you have some success, and where were you hunting this year?
Let's see, I did not have any success. And I say that, and if anybody knows me, it's listening to me, are probably laughing. But I hunted Iowa, Ohio, and Pennsylvania this past season, and I did not kill a deer. Now, I guess I do place some strict self-limitations on myself, so I did have opportunities at some mature deer, but I did not shoot one. Yes, and I did not kill a doe this year. So this was the first year in a long time I hadn't had any deer meat in the freezer, and my friends have let me know that since last season for sure.
Yeah, no deer meat in a freezer is not a sight I like to see. But hey, hitting Iowa and Ohio in the same season sounds pretty good to me. I'll be making my first trip to Ohio this year, so
good.
I'm pretty excited. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. I'm actually headed out on the weekend of the 10th to scout, so I might have to hit you up via email for a little bit of southeastern Ohio advice, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So, I in full transparency, I'm a member of Quality Deer Management Association. I've attended some of the seminars and stuff, and I've found them incredibly valuable, and couldn't be happier with being a member. And if for nothing else, the magazine you all put out is awesome, and it's almost like Christmas every time that I get one. My wife kind of makes fun of me because I do a little bit of a a little bit ashamed to admit, but I might do a little bit of a dance when I walk in the front door from work whenever when that magazine's laying on the staircase for me. But for those that are listening that aren't sure or not clear, because I think sometimes that some folks have some confusion as to what quality deer management is and what it stands for. So if you could just kind of give us a sense of what Quality Deer Management is, or Quality Deer Management Association is, and what kind of services and information you guys provide.
Right. So I get that question a lot, and there's a lot of, I guess, misconceptions or perceptions out there of what we are. But basically, we're for the future of the white-tailed deer, the habitat, and the habitat they live in, our future hunting generation. So basically, we're doing whatever it takes to make sure that, the number one sought-after big game animal doesn't go away, or the habitat that it lives in, and there's future generations come along to able to hunt and enjoy, those white-tailed deer as I did growing up. So in a nutshell, that's probably the best, easiest, I guess, quote-unquote elevator speech I could give somebody. It is to what we do. Now, there's a lot of facets to come off of that, from our disease research to our youth program to our deer stewardships, habitat consulting. I mean, you name it down the board. So there's a lot of stuff that I guess goes along with that. But at the end of the day, we're trying to protect the white-tailed deer, the habitat they live in, and then ensure the future of our hunting heritage.
Right. And the one thing I would kind of add on to that, and you can, correct me if I'm wrong here, but for me, to the person who's maybe not familiar, I consider QDMA kind of like my first stop if I'm looking for some type of information. It's kind of my go-to resource, because typically it's if it's not there, you'll either get a sense of where you may be able to find it, but it's just there's a glut of information on the site, for, as you mentioned, from everything from the biology of deer. I mean, I've gotten lost in the wormhole of QDMA's website of reading just random things that I would have never 5 years ago thought that I'd be interested in reading. But you mentioned something there. Two things that you mentioned was the future, protecting I'll say the Pennsylvania, since I live in Pennsylvania, big game animal, for future generations. And you also mentioned disease research. And I wanted to ask you, for Pennsylvania specifically, what is the state or the status of the Pennsylvania deer's population as it's related to EHD? And then the second part of that question is, what's your opinion? Because I know I've read some stuff recently where they've talked about some culling efforts that might be potentially happening, especially near where my hometown is in that Bedford County, kind of south central portion of Pennsylvania, as a culling as a means to control the spread of EHD in affected areas. So if you could kind of give me a sense of what your opinion is on those two things.
Well, I guess first, the deer herd in Pennsylvania, and that's a tricky question. I guess it also deserves a tricky answer, but throughout the state, it varies. There's probably a lot of hunters out there listening that maybe had a really poor season last year. There's probably a lot of hunters out there that haven't really seen a change, and there's a lot of hunters out there that saw a lot of deer. So they're in pockets. I will say that. You go north of you in north central PA, up in the big woods of Potter County, Tioga, all those bigger areas up there with a lot of timber and a lot of land. The deer numbers are probably down, compared to what they used to be. And also the hunters are down up there too, just because over the years the deer numbers have kind of dwindled and the hunters have dwindled up in that area. So there's more pressure in other areas now than where there usually wasn't or hadn't been historically. And in those areas, they're still seeing deer. So southwestern Pennsylvania, Fayette, Greene, and Washington, Allegheny County, they still have high deer numbers. Parts of the southern part of Fayette anyway. And then you go out through the south, out towards, south central PA, and then over to southeastern PA, where you have a lot more hunters. The deer numbers are kind of balanced out there. They fluctuate back and forth. But for the most part, Pennsylvania's deer herd is very healthy. We've been into, I think this would be the 14th season of antler restrictions and higher doe harvest, and the numbers are still healthy. And we just recently, Pennsylvania does a lot of research and a lot of studies recently, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I do know basically that, because a lot of people say that, it was better before antler restrictions. Not a lot of people. Actually, antler restrictions, or the APRs are in, I think, 84% approval rating right now. But there are still some people out there that say it was better, back when. And they just released a study recently, and I'd have to dig around to find it, but I do know it said that your chances of harvesting a deer now are basically exactly the same as they were when there were no antler restrictions. So just looking at the statistics, the odds haven't changed at all. And now you're just harvesting bigger, older deer.
Right.
So as far as the deer herd, I think it's doing pretty well. A few minor adjustments here and there, which we're probably going to have to go through. In the north woods being more timber cuts, so there's more browse, and it could probably stand to hold a few more deer per square mile. And in the south, it's the complete opposite. A couple areas I hunt in Washington County, I mean, I see a lot of deer. I hate to even speculate how many deer per square mile there are, but there's a lot. So it definitely fluctuates throughout the state, and when I say tricky, it's tricky to answer that question. It's very tricky to manage the state at that level as well and keep everybody happy. You're always going to have some naysayers out there, but overall, I think it's pretty healthy.
Nice. So, I mean, even with the EHD, I know EHD, at least from my novice perspective, isn't rampant or widespread in Pennsylvania at the moment. It seems like it's kind of clustered into that south central portion of Pennsylvania. So,
before you get any further, you're speaking of CWD.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, CWD.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, because when you're talking about calling for EHD, I was thinking I've never seen a study that says you should call deer for EHD.
I got my acronyms backwards. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. But just for the listeners, the difference between EHD and CWD. EHD is basically a biting midge that is more prevalent throughout the drought season. So historically, they've been around forever, especially in southern states where there's a lot of drought. The deer can die from that, or they can also survive. And if they do survive, they become immune to it. So this year, and we're just into basic EHD season right now. So I think we have a pretty low, if any. I haven't heard of any locally anyway of confirmed EHD cases, basically because we've had a pretty wet summer. It's been rainy, so there hasn't been any concentrations of pools for those little midges to grow in. And then CWD obviously is the disease that's basically a prion in the brain that affects the nervous system in the brain, and there is some studies out there on the calling. And you are correct in saying that it is more confined to the south central part of the states so far. To call them, I can go either way with that. I can argue either way, should you or shouldn't you. It's one of those deals, a case by case scenario. I know in Wisconsin when they had it, it was so prevalent up there that they had to call deer. Ours isn't as prevalent as it was, and we've done a really good job at containing it. When it first was found, I forget how many miles, I think it was around, the 600-mile radius, your deer had to be checked and processed, and, try to do a really good job at testing to find, to really narrow down and stop the spread of it. So for the most part, it does pop up every year. But as far as calling efforts, man, that's another controversial, should you or shouldn't you? And there's perfectly acceptable arguments on both sides, honestly.
Right. Yeah. Is there any, I'm trying to think, as far as variables are concerned, because the topography and just kind of the land is different between the states where they have done it and then Pennsylvania where it's being considered, is there anything to that to consider? Because some of the states where they have done it, it's obviously they have larger tracts of, I'm going to assume, ag land, right? And then in smaller blocks of timber, where in some areas, especially, in the area where it seems to be prevalent in Pennsylvania, or at least making its intrusion into Pennsylvania, it's, I grew up in that area, and you're not too far away from there. I mean, we have some agricultural land, but I mean, it's a lot of big blocks of timber. They're not small blocks of timber connecting ag fields. It's, ridge ranges, so on and so forth. So is there anything to the difference between topography that might make it challenging to do a call successfully?
Yes, I would, and purely speculation, but I would assume so. Just being a hunter, I mean, and you're right, in the ridges that you're speaking of compared to ag land, those deer can, they're out, wandering around basically, and CWD spread through deer-to-deer contact. So if they're here one day, where were they 2 days before? Especially if food sources are limited, and if you get water sources. So in those mountainous regions, I would definitely speculate to say that the deer travel further distances and probably have a bigger, not so much core area, but a bigger home range, just because there's more room to wander, so to speak. So I would, I don't know if there's any studies out there that would say that directly, but purely speculation, I would think you're spot on with that.
Right. All right, so on to happier conversations. So I think a lot of our listeners are from high hunting pressure states like Pennsylvania, right, where we have a lot of hunters per square mile. So I wanted to talk, specifically with you about some things that can be done to help folks with their land management efforts to create better hunting, grow more mature bucks, and specifically the impact of employing quality deer management philosophies and setting up QDM cooperatives in their area. So I guess to start, what are some of the guiding principles of quality deer management?
Well, I mean, quality deer management, I guess, going back to, who it is and, who we are and what we do, and some of the misconceptions or perceptions that are out there of us. A lot of people think, and I've run across this, my daily travels, I run across this quite a bit, that for some reason people think that the QDMA is all about higher antlers deer harvest and bigger antlers. And, unfortunately, it's really far from the truth. We would never recommend to shoot does without doing some sort of deer survey, on your property. We want to know the actual numbers before we would recommend that. The bigger antlers are just basically a byproduct of a healthier herd. So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're shooting 3.5 or 4.5-year-old deer as opposed to 1.5 and 2.5, you're always going to have bigger antlers. So, that is just a byproduct of having a healthier herd through the buck to doe ratio. So some of the things, you can do to manage your property, you hit the nail on the head with the co-ops, especially some of the smaller properties, like you say, in the higher pressured area, 30 or 40 acres. A lot of people I get, they have 30 acres. I can't really do that. And I tell you anymore, you can. Now, you're not going to raise a deer and it's going to live completely solely on your 30 acres. But, you could definitely, help skew those odds a bit more in your favor. And then, to take it a step further, there's a lot of research out there that says, the core area, the home range of a mature deer sometimes is around a square mile, so call it 640 acres. Through a cooperative, meaning, you can get the adjoining landowners in an area to agree to a certain set of guidelines or principles. Now you're talking that you can really affect, if you're affecting, from a few hundred acres to, we have them upwards of 60, 70,000 acres. So, and it's not that, it's what you agree upon. So it doesn't have to be that strict of a program. It can be what it makes everybody happy. But at the same time, it's definitely benefiting the deer, it's benefiting the habitat, the whole way across the board. So it all starts with, 30 acres. And I have personal experience with this. A guy in Maryland, called me just, about what we're talking about now. And I think when he started, he had 78 acres. And he was like, man, I'd really like to do something different and try to get my neighbors on board. Because, man, I'm all about quality deer management and everything you guys do and what you preach and food plots. And, he was just doing everything, supplemental feed, trail camera surveys. He's weighing and aging fetuses. And, across the board on 78 acres. And that was, I think we're going into 7 seasons ago when we started this. And we're somewhere between 60 and 70,000 acres tied up into a co-op. And
wow.
Yeah, and it grew, oh my God, like wildfire. And what he did, he was really good at working with people. A lot of times when you say, whether you have 30 acres or 200 acres and you're trying to tell your neighbor, hey, I really think we should do it this way. And especially, if they've been doing it a certain way for 25 or 30 years, a lot of people aren't really open to new suggestions. They have no reason to change because they've been enjoying it the way they were doing it. So you have to be really careful on how you force feed that information to people, and you really can't force feed it at all. You kind of have to just educate them and let it become their idea at some point,
Right.
But what he did was, he wanted to keep the guidelines very minimal whenever he got a few of his closest landowners on board. And I think the first year, it went from like 78 to like 230 acres. And basically he set up a meat pool, so to speak, at his garage. And he invited, I may be wrong, but it was like 4 or 5 landowners, the total of 230 some acres. And the first year, all they did was They shot they had no point restrictions, no age class restrictions. He just said, let's weigh the does we kill. Let's just weigh the does. Okay? And that was pretty simple, right? There was no harm in that. And basically what he was doing is he was creating a baseline. So, and then on top of that, on his own, not only did he weigh the does, but he aged them. So then in his data, he was recording all this. In his data, he would have a 3.5 or 2.5-year-old doe, whatever it may have been. He would age the jawbone, and he would weigh it, and you could show people, here's what it weighs. And of course that's a great tool because I've weighed a lot of deer in my life, and I've heard a lot of people talk about how much their deer weigh, and I've really weighed very few deer that weigh as much as people think they do, especially when it comes to does. I've had a lot of conversations with guys that go, man, my buddy shot a doe, my brother shot a doe, weighed 175 pounds, and I think to date the heaviest doe I've ever weighed was like 124 pounds, out of Pennsylvania. So,
it felt that heavy, dragging it up the ridge, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I know they seem that heavy, but realistically they're probably not. So basically he created this baseline of how much the does weighed and how old they were, right? So, fast forward the next year on their own, and by doing that all season, it created conversation. They couldn't wait to get there when somebody shot a deer, just to stand around the meat pool and look at the scale and talk about what they saw that day. They did it all through bow season and the gun season, and it was really cool. Everybody enjoyed it. So the next year on their own, he didn't even pressure them. They said, hey, how about we implement a 4-point antler restriction? We're going to shoot anything under 4 points, and this was in Maryland, so they don't have any statewide antler restrictions at the time. So, and just Garrett County, Maryland, so not far from where I am here, within 50 miles of me, so a lot of the same territory. So anyway, they implemented a 4, let's just not shoot 4 points type of deal. And they did the same thing. They weighed the deer, and they were not shooting, they were passing spikes in the 3-pointers, so to speak, and they weighed the does again, and if they killed bucks, they weighed them aged does also. And then it got interesting in the third year because somewhere between year 1 and year 3, the more landowners were catching on to these guys all hanging out in my buddy's garage there and talking about what they were doing. So they started showing up. Hey, how can I tie my land in this? This is pretty cool, And it slowly was growing to from 400 acres to 800 acres to 1,200 acres and so forth. And the next year, from the third year to the fourth year, on their own, they didn't. I mean, it was just like, hey, we want to not shoot anything less than an 8-point. So now it's kind of serious, When you start protecting deer up to the 8 points, you're probably protecting most of the 1.5-year olds, and that's what we want you to do. That's what if you're looking for a better age class, if you can protect those 1.5-year-old bucks, you're doing a really good job. And put an 8-point restriction on. I mean, you're not protecting all of them, but you're going to protect probably 85-90% of them. So that's really good. And then also, because these guys are standing around, I call it the fire plot every evening talking, they started supplemental feeding, and some guy that wasn't doing food plots at all 3 years ago is now doing food plots. So now they're creating better habitat. They're creating a better their land becoming better just because of this. Basically, let's stand around and weigh the does type of deal. And that third year, when they started shooting the same age class does when they were weighing them, they noticed that they were getting heavier, right? And that was when the light bulb went off on everybody's head. If the does are heavier, they're healthier. They're healthier. That's what we're looking for, a healthier deer herd, right? So
right.
It basically started because of him saying, let's just weigh and age the does, right? But when he kept very meticulous data, and when you were able every year to open that data book, that log book, and look every year, see the 2.5-year-olds getting 6, 8, 10 pounds heavier, you're going the right direction. And then, when they got to the 8-point, antler restriction, then these bigger, the fourth year now, if they had been protecting bucks for almost 3 years, now they started killing 3.5-year-old deer. They were actually huntable, 3.5-year-old deer being hunted that hadn't been in previous years.
Wow.
And last spring, every year, they invite everybody. They have a local branch there, QDMA branch, and they invite everybody that's in the co-op to come to the banquet, and they invite you to bring any bucks that you've killed off of that co-op that you've mounted. It doesn't have a minimum score, but if you paid to have taxidermy done, bring it. We'll display it. Let people talk about it, type of deal. And again, I don't know if it was exactly, but I think there was 128 deer brought last year's banquet, and there was a few of them over 170.
Wow.
They are killing 5.5-year-old plus deer now. I mean, they're there and very huntable, so it has really been a successful co-op, and the whole area has benefited from it. I mean, even the people that aren't in the co-op, all the way down to the state land, because these properties border, state game lands, other ground. I mean, the area is just better. The hunting is phenomenal around there. And I had hunted there, when I was a kid, 20 years old type of deal. And I mean, basically it was spikes and 3-points and that such, and literally walking around, listening to the stories, feeling the vibe at that banquet. I mean, it sells out at over 300 people. I'm pretty sure it was 128 deer on the wall, and most of them were over 130 inches out of that area. Would have been 20 years ago. I mean, if one of those bucks came out of that area, I mean, that would have been a big deal. Now there's so many. And it's just simply because a few guys decided to allow some of these deer to get age. And, that's what's happening. It's just the snowball effect. And again, when I talk about some of the, you don't have to get so strict with it. They have, any youth can shoot, and anybody up to 16 can shoot whatever they want. Any senior can shoot whatever they want. And also, it's not like you get fined. I mean, if you own the property and your hunter doesn't have time to hunt, and you see a deer you want to shoot, man, we want you to have fun and enjoy doing it. So shoot what you want. There's no punishment. You know what I mean? We would like you to go by these guidelines, but at the end of the day, we also want you to enjoy the outdoors and nature. So, hey, it's basically the good old boys club. Man, do what you want, have a good time. You know what I mean? But just don't abuse the system type of deal. But hey, let's make sure we're doing this for all the right reasons. And then at the end of the day, it's absolutely not about the big antlers. It's just a lot of fun. And there's not a hunter out there that doesn't want to shoot a trophy buck. I mean, so right. the byproduct of a healthy deer herd is big antlers. So, I mean, and I've done some speaking throughout my time, and I always get, the guy in the back of the room, raising his hands going, I've been a hunter for 40 years, and I work 6 days a week, which we know there's a lot of guys, especially in Pennsylvania, we can't hunt on Sunday, so you don't get a lot of time to hunt. Why should I have to abide by an antler restriction when I just want to shoot whatever comes by? Well, my answer to that is, first you can shoot a doe. So if you're worried about 3 or 4 point, I get it. I mean, I'm a guy. We like to drive fast cars and chase the pretty girls in high school. We like to shoot bucks. You know what I mean? But
right.
When you ask these guys, they can care less if they shoot a 10-point or a spike. My first question to them is, okay, if you're sitting in the woods on the opening day of gun season in Pennsylvania, which you and I both know is a huge deal in Pennsylvania. And
right, yeah, absolutely.
2 bucks walk up to you. One of them's a 135-inch 10-point, the other one's a 4-point. Which one are you going to shoot? Well, the answer is always the 10-point, right? So
right.
These guys aren't, those guys that say that, they're not trophy hunters until they're presented the opportunity. So by having a healthier deer herd, those statistics of killing an older age class buck go up. Now, it's not a guarantee. It's still hunting, and it's still quite hard to shoot a deer. Actually, I think only 10% of the hunting population is another statistic I'll throw at you, but only 10% of the hunting population shoot a deer over 130 inches in their lifetime. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so when you look at those statistics, it's definitely not like you're going to do this every year, every season. But when you start to do things to put the odds in your favor, why not, right? So, right. I mean, and again, keep it fun, keep it interesting. And another thing, too, from the biology side, when again, in Pennsylvania, 940,000 hunters, and they've all been hunting for 30 years, and they've been doing it a certain way, traditional deer hunting for, since their grandfather's age. They don't want to do things different, and they definitely don't want to. It's kind of a macho thing. You don't want to tell somebody what they're doing or had been doing for such a long time is wrong. But when you start educating them from a biological standpoint, like how to age a deer properly, like, one guy told me one time, he can age deer by how fast they walk. he calls the slow walkers were the older ones, and I just always laugh about that. I mean, there may be some truth to that, we get bad hips and such, but
right.
But it was just, but there's a lot of different theories out there on aged deer. You go to a butcher shop, and I mean, guys say that deer's old, it's got a gray face, or it's got a short nose, or its ears are long, whatever.
Right.
But when you actually teach them to pull a jawbone and show them how to look at the jaw and age, the enamel and the dentine in the tooth scientifically, at first, if you explain it to them, they're very standoffish. But when they find it's really easy to do, I mean, we educate hunters all the time to do that. And in 10 minutes, I can teach you pretty accurately to age deer via jawbone. And when you show them that, man, they're really interested. They want to learn more, And it just takes something as little as that to open their mind up to maybe there is more than one way to skin the proverbial cat.
Right. Nice. Yeah, I think a couple things. First, I think you just created a T-shirt when you said we like to drive fast cars, chase pretty girls, and shoot big bucks. Like to me, there's a T-shirt in there somewhere.
Yeah, I should trademark that.
Yeah, I would absolutely get yourself an IP attorney and trademark that thing immediately. I'll give you at least 2 weeks to do that before I might take it. But the couple things you mentioned there. So what I'm hearing, just to kind of recap, right, is a few things that you want to do that are kind of things to set up a co-op. And what they've done there is absolutely nothing short of amazing. I mean, when you're talking about 70,000 plus acres of co-op land, I mean that's absolutely incredible. But what he did initially was he established a core area where he was going to begin the co-op. He had his 30 acres, and he wanted to reach out to the immediate folks who were around them to get them involved. But the way you kind of described it was he didn't go in like a bull in a china shop. He said, I'm going to follow these guidelines, and I'm going to kind of lead by example as to what can happen. And that was kind of how that was his communication into these folks. And so then it sounds to me like the next step is then to create an effective line of communication with hunters and landowners in your areas to kind of show them where that the proof is in the pudding to a degree. And then and I'm assuming as this thing grows, like I'm assuming folks kind of like get involved and start to divvy up some of the responsibilities to communicate things out to, like, whether it's harvest data or whether it's the weight data like you were talking about. I'm assuming that probably doesn't all fall on one person. They're probably starting to divide and conquer some of that information.
Absolutely. Now, at this point now, they have basically certain farms throughout the co-op that are basically quote unquote check stations, if you will. So basically, say farms land, some people have just volunteered their time. Okay, for this, I don't know if they call them quadrants or sections, but I'll be the check station for this section. You be the check station for that section. And again, the most important thing is, there's no punishment. It doesn't have to be strict. We're not going to lose our tempers if somebody shoots a deer and doesn't check it with, John Brown's, farm over there, because at the end of the day, it needs to be fun. But let's try to keep those to a minimum. Everybody's on the same page. And you're right. Let me rewind a little bit. What the initial guy did was he did buy the 4 adjoining landowners, or 5 if it was. They bought them QDMA memberships, so they were receiving the quality whitetails. And I'll stand by it as one of the most informational magazines ever put out on whitetail deer and hunting or habitat, whatever if you're interested in any of the hunting magazines, that is our best tool as far as recruitment's concerned. And he did do that, and slowly but surely, you're not going to force feed. And like I said, you're not going to force feed, a 30-year veteran on to change his ways overnight. But slowly but surely, through education and like you said, the proof's in the pudding, they do come around, because it's a fun process. And another thing too is he got the kids involved, especially during the fetus studies in their late season. With some of the does that they were harvesting, after they were bred. Get a group of kids around and actually show them how to, look at, measure, and weigh a fetus, and how you can, count back and see when it was actually conceived. And, you can put that against the moon phase. You can, guys are hunting, you can, count back for, scientifically that it was conceived on November 7th. Boom, there, you want to ask when the rut was. Well, there's a lot of proof right there.
Right.
They do a lot of that stuff, and they get the youth involved. And when the youth's involved, the parents are having fun with it. And in some aspects, it becomes a family activity. I've been around kids that can age jawbones and actually weigh and age a fetus, and, they know how to count back the days. And it's pretty neat to see, actually.
Right. There's one thing that you mentioned there was, not everyone's going to necessarily abide by the rules, and you don't want to kind of drop the hammer on those folks because this is still supposed to be fun. And so you do establish rules. You mentioned that you want to like go after certain antler restrictions once you get to a certain point where everyone's kind of committed to this thing. Or if you have some folks who are really knowledgeable and they've learned how to age on the hoof roughly, right? You can have them start doing that, which is to me would be a little bit more advanced. But to me, it would almost be the best mechanism to have people or to help people fall in line is just that social pressure, right? So if everybody else is kind of following the same guidelines and the same rules, and they're only harvesting, the bucks, per the restrictions that you put in place, whether it's age or whether it's antler, and everyone else seems to be doing that, you really don't need to say anything to that one person who's falling out of line, because he's going to be able to clearly see that everybody else is having success and following the rules at the same time.
Right.
And it's amazing what social pressure can do, right?
Yeah, it takes care of itself. It really does. And I've seen that's the great aspect, and I've seen the downside where you've gotten too strict with the rules and you try to implement punishment, and that never works because at the end of the day, we're supposed to be having fun with it. It's our right. We're hunters and gatherers by nature, and when you start, you want to find somebody for shooting a sub-legal according to their standards, deer. It just takes the fun out of it. You know what I mean? So that's, you try to shy away from that, and you're right, the social pressure itself will take care of itself. And you know what, deer are a renewable resource, man. Even if you kill a few of them that, didn't quite meet the guidelines according to the club rules type of deal, guess what, man, there's going to be a whole slew of them next year the same age. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
and then, go ahead.
No,
I was just going to say, the other thing that you mentioned was fun, and you'd mentioned the magazine, and I kind of gave it gave it some love at the top of the podcast, because I do think that it's by far the best magazine I get, and I get a handful of bow hunting magazines and whitetail habitat management type of magazines and so on and so forth, and it by far the QDMA magazine I get is the hands down best magazine that I receive. So kudos to you and the QDMA folks putting out stuff that's amazingly informative, and I'll 100% agree with you. I probably trying to figure out how to word this properly. The most fun I've ever had hunting was when I started taking the farm that we have and starting to implement habitat changes through, whether it was, making bedding and cover, hinge cutting, and implementing food plots, and really running my cameras all year round so I could kind of monitor the deer herd all year round. That was really when hunting went to the next level of fun for me. And I sometimes think that I almost enjoy the management side of it, maybe just even a little bit more than the actual hunt, because I can actually do that, 10 months out of the year, essentially, versus, I get to archery hunt, because I don't do a lot of gun hunting anymore. So my season for the most part is done there, in PA, at least at the end of November, and then I'll go back out for, late November, and then I'll go back out for a late season for a couple of days. But the management part of it, I can enjoy 12 months, at least, if not 12, 10 months out of the year. And to your point, it's like I started getting my daughter involved in it, and there's not a better way to get her outside and just appreciating the outdoors and the animals, the wild creatures that we get to chase and how awesome they are to watch in their own environment than to get her out there and doing those things and contributing in a meaningful way to the land that hopefully one day she'll join me and hunt with me.
Right. And you're 100% right. When you get in touch with nature and start managing, like you say, 10 months of the year, it's a whole different level. And I don't, it's just not about hunting anymore. It's not about, a lot of people think that, it's about the killing, and it's really not. And at some point we put the 5 stages of the hunting out there, and basically you go from a teenager up until your 50s and 60s. And when you're a teenager, man, you do want to get out there, and you have that need, that basic primal urge to get blood on your hands. And at the end of the day, that is what it's about, And then you kind of graduate from that, and you want to get into like the quality stage. Maybe you become more picky, and you're shooting 3.5-year-old, or you're trying to shoot 3.5-year-olds and older, and then you start to manage your ground and what you're doing now. And then you start to mentor people, and then I'm around some camps that have those 60 and 70 and even 80-year-old guys that, man, they just want to show up for the social aspect. They've been there and done all that, but they still show up. They could really care less if they ever kill another deer, but man, they'd love to be part of that system. And I'm a firm believer that it's that primal instinct in us, just because I predominantly do not come from a hunting family, and everything I've done in life has been based around bow hunting, honestly, or being outdoors hunting in general. So, you can't say that, I'm from a family of hunters and, that was the only way I was going to do it. I mean, not really, man. I kind of carved this niche out myself, and I really do think it's something that is in us. It's who we are. It wasn't long ago, I don't know, 150, 200 years ago. I mean, we were hunters and gatherers by nature. I've went as far as saying, watch a group of, talk about kids, but watch a group of kids when they get together. And, it doesn't take them very long. They start playing hide and seek. And I truly think hide and seek is probably one of the earliest forms of hunting. You never taught your daughter how to play hide and seek, right? You've never seen anybody teach her. She just knows how to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's in us. That's who we are, right? Some of us, it kind of is gone and forgotten because they're not exposed to it at a young age. I think there's some statistics out there on the youth programs that are out there. And if you don't expose children to that primal instinct by the age of 14, it goes away really quickly. But if they experience it, like you're probably doing with your daughter up until 14 years old, it stays with them for a long time, and they're probably more likely to pass it on. So
right. I mean, for me, it's I hope that she hunts. Right. It's like I took her out for a turkey hunt this year. That was her first hunt. She went into the blind with me. She, of course, wasn't carrying a weapon. I was using a bow, and we went and we sat, and that was her first hunt. So, will she hunt whenever she gets a little older? I hope that she does. But I can't say for certain that she will. But what I'm trying to do more than anything is that I want her to have that appreciation of the outdoors and know that to be a hunter is okay.
Sure.
That it's not something that, even if you prefer to not partake of procuring your own, as Shane Mahoney would say, wild proteins, that, if you don't choose to participate in that way, that's okay. I choose to take the responsibility for the life that I'm going to take to consume for my own nutritional value.
Right.
So I want her to at least have that perspective.
Right, and I'm a firm believer when I say when you're raised by wolves, you act like a wolf type of deal, and that goes just to that. I have a 9-year-old son, and he hasn't hunted yet. I mean, he has never taken a gun or a bow into the woods, with the sole purpose to kill something. Now, he has tagged along with me, but
right.
I'm not like you. I'm not forcing him into it at all. It's it's the opportunity is there, but I really do believe by him just watching and being around me and everything that I and my friends do, that at some point it's going to click, and oh man, this is why they do it. It is awesome, and you're giving back to nature. And we plant trees, and we have a food plot. The bottom part of my yard's a food plot. So
right.
it's there's a lot more to it than just I'm doing this because I want my deer hunting to be better. It really is as trying not to be a tagline, but it really is who I am and what I am. So I think by by nature he's going to pick up on it. But if he doesn't, it's not a big deal either. I 100% agree with you. He's certainly going to be okay with it. And just recently, throwing another statistic out there, but I think hunting approval right now is at the highest that it's ever been, based, for a lot of different reasons in the hunter games, and, kind of portraying hunting in a different aspect, and, the whole locavore movement, where a lot of people are going away from, meat that's bought in a grocery store that you don't really know where it came from. That movement's pretty big, and hunting approval from non-hunters, I think, is in the 80th percentile somewhere. So hunting approval rating by non-hunters is higher than it's ever been right now for a lot of those same reasons you say, and that's fine. If our kids choose not to be like us, that's fine, as long as they understand what it is we're actually doing. We're managing a resource, and there's a lot of benefits from that. Not just putting meat in a freezer.
Right, and I think the other thing important to kind of say is that what you mentioned just a second ago is that we're managing a resource. I think a lot of times non-hunters don't look at it from that perspective and don't understand the type of commitment that hunters make toward conservation, how important the lands are to us, and that and how large of a role we play in ensuring that people that don't choose to hunt, which is fine, that have the opportunity to still enjoy those natural resources, from taking pictures to hiking to boating or whatever the case might be, that you have clean waters, that you have clean air, that you have beautiful places to go visit and watch wild creatures, not behind a cage or not in a zoo. I think sometimes that notion's lost on folks, and it's always nice to hear, and hopefully our little podcast will do a little part in reminding some folks.
Absolutely, yes, that would be great.
So I think I had one or two other questions, but I think you covered off on everything that is setting up a quality a QDM co-op. Before we let you go, I don't want to eat up a ton of your time because I know you're traveling this week a bit. But if folks are interested in getting involved in creating a QDM co-op or just getting more information about QDMA, where are some of the places they can go and the types of information they get, and where can they find them?
Well, you just first they could go to our website. We have a page dedicated to co-ops. I don't know how many articles have been written on it. There's a ton of information, as you mentioned before, on our website. Under the co-op section, or any section they want, about hunting co-ops. I mean, managing your land. There's a lot. So you can go there. You can start there, or you can call your regional director. We have 11 of them throughout the United States and into Canada. So you can call your QDMA regional director who would fall in your region and pick his brain about it, and they can point you in the right direction, definitely. And even a step further, we do now have co-op. Basically, paid co-op employees through a basic cost share program with the two different state agencies. Missouri being one, we have two co-op professionals there. Their job is to solely work with land managers that want to enroll their land into some sort of co-op program. And we have one in Michigan, with one maybe potentially coming in New York. So we have three on board now, and hopefully a fourth one soon. We're hoping that, Missouri, kind of kicked it off with, they started it, the State Department of Missouri, and then we partnered with them, and it's been very successful in Missouri, so we're hoping other states follow suit. But it would be great if each state, especially in the Northeast, had a co-op specialist within their state.
Yeah, that'd be great. How can people get involved? As I'd mentioned, I'm a member of QDMA, but how can folks get involved with QDMA in their area and just then at large, whether it's becoming a member or getting involved to help with volunteering and so forth? Yeah,
easiest way to do that is call your regional director and find the closest branch to you. We have around somewhere over 200 branches nationwide. So it's probably, I would be safe to bet that there's probably a branch within an hour and a half or 2 hours of somebody, on the far end, and maybe even 25 minutes from somebody. So call your regional director, tell them where you're from and you want to be involved, and they'll easily put you in touch with somebody and love to have you, because we're always looking for more help out there.
Nice. And then if folks out there listening, if you do nothing else, it's well worth I don't exactly remember how much it is, but it's well worth the few bucks it costs to become a QDMA member on the site and sign up, and you get the magazine that Ryan and I both mentioned earlier, and it's full of all kinds of information. It's been invaluable to me. So before I let you go, the one thing I always like to do is to just kind of go on a quick hunt with our guests. So I'd like for you to take us on a hunt, a memorable hunt of yours. It doesn't have to be whitetail. It can be, whatever species that you're going after. Just give us every detail from the truck to the tailgate story and let us know what state you're hunting in.
Man, that's a tough one for me. I'm kind of embarrassed to say, but, a lot of people would probably answer that, they love to hunt with a family member, and I kind of didn't grow up hunting in that situation with family members, and my son isn't old enough to where he's really hunting yet, so I haven't got to enjoy that part of it, but I am predominantly a big whitetail deer hunter, and I don't even know if I can narrow it down to one specific day, and I guess the one that I would share with you would be a specific season, and I actually I ended up not killing this deer, but man, it's haunted me, and it's probably been it was just a fun season. But I guess, 7 or 8 years ago, I started hunting with a recurve for a lot of reasons, but none of them really make sense. But anyway, I hunt with a recurve now, and I can tell you this for sure, since I've switched to a recurve, I have killed a lot less deer. But it's been a lot of fun. Anyway, one year, I guess this would have been in 2012. So 4 seasons ago. I was hunting a buck that I got the first picture of him on August 5th. And he was a big, mature 5x5 with some sticker points. So I called him Stickers. He was a really big deer. And, wow, I want to get on that buck. And it was actually funny because I'd just gotten permission to hunt the farm. And I threw that camera out, one day, checked it like 3 or 4 days later, and he was the first deer I got a picture of on the farm. It happened to be him. And I guess being, kind of advanced level of hunting, I'm a firm believer certain deer have personality. Some are very hard, to pattern and figure out and very shy by nature. And some of them are just, very photogenic, and Stickers happened to be one of those deer. It seemed like every time I hunted, I'd at least see him, and I just had tons of pictures of him. So long story short, in November, I think the season ended that year on the 12th. So this has been like the 10th maybe or the 9th. He was chasing a doe, and, him and I had been back and forth. And again, I was hunting with a recurve. So, I mean, they got to be inside the 20-yard line. And, there's a lot of limitations there. So I had a few opportunities to kill him, or I would have had opportunities to kill him had I had a compound, but I didn't. So I guess I really didn't have the opportunity to kill him. But anyway, that day he came down and he was chasing the doe, and he let his guard completely down. And I mean, everything was going right. And he comes in behind me, 8-9 yards, goes around the front quarter and away, 11, 12 yards. And I mean, I literally shot a foot over his back. I don't know. I mean, it was one of those deals where, I just didn't pick a spot. I didn't concentrate, buck fever. It was all the above. And,
right.
Shoot over his back. So, the next morning, I actually snuck back into that stand. It was a stand that I hunted on a north wind, especially just a little bit later in the morning when the thermals were rising. And it was basically it was a north wind stand, and there was an eastern, off to my east, northeast kind of, there was I don't want to call it a doe bedding area, but it was an area that kind of created a natural bull, and the does and fawns just stayed in it. It was almost like an auditorium, if you will. Every time I went by there, I would run deer out of there. So, I mean, I would be very careful not to run them out of there. And on a north wind, especially out of the northeast, a buck of the morning could walk the ridge top, and basically with the thermals rising, when the sun hit the ground, could scent check that whole area. And there was a drainage that came out of a seepage that came out of the hillside, just to the southwest of that area. So it really funneled the movement around me and narrowed them down naturally to, I think it was like 13 yards. I mean, it's if you really understood topography and what was going on there, it was, almost like cheating. You kind of got to shoot your way out type of deal for these deer moving naturally across this ridge top. So I snuck back in there again the next morning because when I had shot at him the day before, he really had no idea what happened. He didn't even know I was there. He was more interested in the doe. Snuck back in there the next morning and had another opportunity, and didn't get a shot at him because he was moving too quickly, again chasing the doe. And then not long after him, a big 5-year-old 4x4. I'd never had a picture of this deer. He just showed up. Obviously, there were some hot does in the area, and I ended up missing that buck. Just about the same place that I missed Stickers the day before. So it's like, man, when it can't get any worse, right? And then I think that was Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday I couldn't hunt, but so Saturday being the last day, I kind of go back into that farm, but I go a quarter mile away because it was actually the winds had switched from the north to the south, so I couldn't hunt those stands anymore. I get into the southwest stand, and up on a ridge top, and I'm just like down. I'd seen these Stickers I don't know how many times. It's the last day, that feeling. It's like, man, here I am again eating tag soup. What am I doing with this recurve type of deal? And I mean, the sun's coming up, and why am I doing this? Everything goes through your mind at that point. And I'd seen a lot of bucks that season, and some really nice ones. And I was very happy. At the end of the day, it's not about, I do like to kill those deer, but those experiences are pretty cool too. And the fact that I'm just talking about this and I didn't get to kill the deer is a pretty cool thing. So you can tell that I probably do enjoy it.
Right.
Anyway, on the last day, I hear, one of those, slow, in those November mornings when the leaves are real crunchy, and you just hear that one deer walking, crunching on the leaves. There's no doubt, that you cannot mistake that gait, that cadence of that, those leaves crunching, just one animal. It's a buck. You don't know how old he is, but it's a buck, and he's out looking for a doe. Man, I don't know what it was. I just instantly stood up and was kind of on a bend and grabbed my bow, and I looked over to my left, and he's 30 yards with his head down just walking, and here comes Stickers again. And I'm like, oh my God. I know where he's at. I had, I kind of cut paths in and close old trails off and open new ones up so they funnel, basically again right into my wheelhouse. I need all the help I can get with a recurve. And I mean, he's on one of those trails leading. I mean, I know he's going to end up at 8-9 yards, and I mean, he's, you know, I'm basically got my taxidermist on speed dial. And I mean, he walks in there, and I mean, he literally stops. I mean, you couldn't have stopped him in any better spot. You know, his near shoulder forward, and I draw back and release the arrow, and it goes 2 inches underneath of him. I mean, and it's like. I mean, at least I didn't shoot over him that time, because before everybody's like, why do you keep shooting over these deer? You know, and I wasn't hitting anchor, so I was so excited. And if you shoot traditional, you'll realize when you don't hit anchor and you're not picking a spot, you tend to miss high. And so missing low was actually a little bit of a sigh of relief for me, because I actually hit anchor, but I did not kill the deer. So anyway, I mean, that was that story. And unfortunately, he was killed the first day of gun season by the neighbor. And wow. You know, they knew I was hunting him, and I had a history with him, so they called me, and I mean, we all got along great, and I measured him, and he was 165 and 3/8. So, I mean, he was a big, you know, and he was only a 4-year-old, which is really cool. Man, you know, had he made it that, you know, into a 5 or a 6-year-old, I don't know what he would have blown up into, and that is a Pennsylvania deer. Wow. So. Yeah, really neat story, and I think back of the opportunity and the enjoyment that he gave me that season, and that's probably one of my fondest memories of bow hunting for sure.
Well, that story was awesome, and I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna sleep tonight, because that just got me jacked up and ready for the and ready for the season. So, and I think the way you described it, I think what you said was like how excited you were, even though a harvest wasn't the end result. I think it goes back to something that we mentioned earlier, which is just, you know, how connected we are to the outdoors and how much it means to us. When you can have that kind of enjoyment in what some would consider a failure, right? Because you'd have some of these folks who consider themselves to be professional hunters, where it's like, if it's not a harvest, it's not a successful hunt. My opinion, like some of my favorite hunts were trips where I came home with nothing but a story and a memory, you know. Yeah. So
there's a whole romance to it, and I get caught up in talking a lot about it, and you know, some of my history was being a national, you know, competitive archer, and won a national championship in 2002. And I remember doing an interview with, at the time it was 3D Times magazine, and they called me, you know, a tournament archer. You know, I just won a national tournament, and I remember like instantly thinking, I'm not a tournament archer. I mean, because everything I shot a bow just to get better at being a bow hunter, because I couldn't hit a deer once, I mean, back then. So I just started shooting out, you know, as guys, again, we have that competitive side to us. So, you know, yeah, I went to 3D shoots, and then it rolls into indoor shoots, and then I'm shooting FIA style tournaments and such. And I win a big tournament, but never once in my life did I pick my bow up and go to a range because I was a tournament archer. I was a bow hunter by nature that just wanted to be better. And, that whole, what I'm getting at is, it's not that hunt, but it's the romance. You know, it's not you know, how we hunt, but rather the why we're hunting. And I think when people get in tune with that, they get in touch with that, it's what really, you know, probably you have it, it's what really draws you back, you know, that whole romance. And not to say that I want to go out hunting, you know, like last season and not kill a deer. At the end of the year, you know, at the end of the day, the end of the hunt, whatever, I mean, we all do it for a reason. I equate it to like, it's like going to work without getting a paycheck. No matter how you love your job, you want to get paid at the end of the day, right? So, I mean, right. I really don't go hunting just to see the sunrise. I mean, I could see the sunrise from my front porch, you know, type of deal. You know, I do go there for that end result. But at the same time, the romance and you know, that whole process of, like you said, managing land, or, you know, whether it be managing your land or shooting your bow, the responsibility of having your broadheads fly true, you know, to the responsibility of cutting those lanes in, like I say, and closing trails off, and understanding wind direction and air currents and thermals, and trying to outwit and get that 3.5-year-old or 2, and whatever it may be inside that 20-yard line, that whole process, that's why I do it, you know. And ultimately, I do want it, and once that all that preparation, and once all that comes together, I do want to, you know, I want to close the deal more than anybody. But if it doesn't, it's not a wasted hunt at all.
Right. Yeah. It's the I think you just said it perfectly. It's the journey, and whenever everything comes together, it makes it that much sweeter. But with that said, I know I've kept you here, for about an hour. I want to be respectful.
You can tell I have no problem talking about this stuff. I'm fine.
Absolutely. But I do want to be respectful of your time, and I do want to thank you for hopping on. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I'm sure the folks listening have gotten a ton of information, or going to particularly enjoy that story. So thanks for your time, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
All right. With that, this episode is a wrap. We'd like to thank Ryan for joining the podcast today. And please be sure to visit qualitydeermanagementassociation.com and check out all the information that they have there. Also, do yourself a service and sign up for their membership. The magazine that you receive alone is well worth the membership cost. Be sure to follow QDMA on all their various social media channels, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And I will also provide you links to the website and all their social media handles in the blog post show notes. And last but certainly not least, I want to give a big thank you to all of you out there who are listening. Every month it seems that the podcast downloads continue to grow, and that's due to the folks out there, all of you who are listening and hitting play every 2 weeks when we put out a new podcast. So a big thank you to all of you. With that said, please feel free to share out any of the podcasts that you think any of your friends and or family would enjoy the content. We'd be much appreciative of that. As always, you can find us and subscribe to us on iTunes and Stitcher. And if you would, please leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes if you are enjoying the podcast. That would be much appreciated and very helpful. So until next time, we'll see you all.